Hello, my dear students. Welcome to the session 13 of the Model Developmental Psychology 2. As I told you, I'm now in Portugal, and this class will be for you to watch this video. You can also check the presentation on Google Classroom, and you'll have to do a small exercise that I will explain to you in a while. Besides that, you are expected to go at 1:40 to the classroom because Professor Maria Rita will be there waiting for you. But I will send you an email to remind you of that. Okay? Today's class is about elderly's social and emotional development. This is the last class with contents for your final exam, and please be attentive because later I will explain to you exactly what you should study and exactly what I will ask you for the exam um, for you. Besides that, I also prepared a list of the vocabulary, as usually, that you might want to explore and to understand better. So, about elderly social and emotional development in late adulthood, what is important for you to know? As usual, when we talk about psychosocial development of human beings, we report to the theory of Erik Erikson. We already discussed how this normative crisis that we have in life might be we should look at those normative crises with some care and to adapt to the nowadays and to the reality of each culture. However, I think that is important always to report to Erik Erikson, and I think that his view about what happens this age is really important. As you remember, the first crisis for that we face for Erickson in infancy is trust versus mistrust. Is where we start our process of growing up in terms of psychosocial development. People needs to uh, face this crisis of can I trust in the world or not? And this is, as you know, related to attachment. Now that you reach late adulthood, the crisis that we have, according to Erikson, is ego, integrity versus despair. As Erikson explains, in this final stage, when we reach this age, we reflect on the kind of person we have been. We reflect on the life we have. And when looking back and to think about the life we have, we might feel ego integrity if we feel that our life was worth living. If we look back and we feel that our life was worth living, we will feel complete. We feel as a whole and satisfied with our achievements. With that, our sensations will be of serenity and contentment, and we are comfortable in our life. This is associated with psychosocial maturity, someone that accepts the life they have and they accept that this life will finish sooner or later. But on the other hand, when we look back and we feel that our life was not worth living, we might feel despair. This despair happens when we think that many of our decisions were wrong and that now we don't have time to do what we would like to do. This sensation of we don't have time anymore and that my life was not worth living might be associated with very negative emotions, a sensation of despair that makes sometimes people being very angry and always yelling at the others, and most importantly, not accepting of the coming death. That's why it's important for the individuals to look back to their lives and in the moment present to be to be able to answer this question in a very positive way. Is it okay to have been me? Through our lives, we need to be able to say, yes, it is okay to be me. We need always to accept our existence, to believe that being the person we are in each moment of our life, it is okay. But now, in late adulthood, we do it looking at the past. We do it looking if the person that I was okay. That's why I would like you to do this exercise. Imagine that you are at 75 years old. How would you describe your life in order to answer, yes, it is okay to have been me? I want you to describe what life you have. Now that you are 75, look back and to think what achievements did you have? What did you do in your life in the past? So now that you are 75, you can say that you reach what Erickson called ego integrity. Think about the life that you had in the past that was a worth living life. And this is what really matters. To be able to reach late adulthood, to look back to our life and to think, yes, I don't have that much time ahead of me. But when I look back, I think and I feel my life was worth living for this, and this. I want you to explain that in the assignment that you have on Google Classroom. Just open the task number 22. But besides these normative tasks that Erickson defined, back in 1968 also defined other developmental tasks in late adulthood. And these three that he identified are related to three important aspects that we already talked in the last classes. One is related to work. As we talked before, during our adulthood, we spend most of our times working. And we also find that even our own identity, the person we are, is defined according to what we do, according to our life. So, in this late adulthood, in terms of psychosocial development, people has the challenge, the task to redefine themselves, to find other purposes that are not related to their roles in workplace or other occupations. The second is about their own bodies. We talked about aging and how, with time, when we reach late adulthood, we start to lose some physical capabilities and even cognitive capabilities. Sometimes there are chronic disease or many other physical problems. And the idea here is not the challenge of not living always complaining about, I have this pain, I cannot do this anymore, or always complaining about the body problems that we have. To accept this and to create ourselves behind our own bodies is another task that late adults have. Finally, related to the coming death, because death is closer, another challenge, developmental task that late adults have is ego transcendence. Instead of being thinking about being almost dying, that dying is coming, is to believe and to feel and to accept that my existence transcends, goes behind death. And this is another task that late adults have. Feldman, in the book that I already report, that I also told you that is an important reference, also told about other developmental tasks in late adulthood. That includes aspects like spending time well. We talked about this. Now they have time, but they don't have that many remaining time in their lives. So it's important that the time that they have now they spend in a fruitful way. And for that, to be with others, to continue to make friends, to have new connections is really an important challenge. But there are many other challenges that you have here on the list and different aspects that you should take into consideration when you want to think about psychosocial development in elderly. How they are dealing with these tasks that they have now in their lives. And when we talk about developmental tasks in the present moment, One important aspect that I would like to highlight is this looking back to life. As I told you, indeed, to reach ego integrity, we look back to life, trying to see if it was a worth living life or not. This moment of life is indeed a moment in which people examines and evaluates their own lives. This process of looking back and to think about their past lives is called a life review or reminiscence. And I would like to talk a little bit about this because this is a very important exercise for elderly and can be a very important tool for psychologists when we talk with elderly. But more than that, can be a very important tool as relatives of some elderly people for you to do in your daily life when you are interacting with them. Reminiscence can be very, very positive and a very powerful tool for the quality of life and happiness of elderly people. Why? Because this doing reminiscence, looking to their past, they can come to a better understanding of their own past. With that, they can find ways to resolve unresolved problems and conflicts that they had with specific people. And with that, they can start to living their current lives with greater serenity. Doing this with other people, reminiscence can also contribute for a sense of sharing with others, to be connected with others. Indeed, in many elderly centers of, or nursing homes, um, these exercises of reminiscence are doing in a group. Psychologists or social work put them together and make them sharing their experiences. And this is really powerful. With reminiscence, we can also have cognitive benefits, improving memory, bringing up other memories that may be triggered by what they are calling, but also bringing sounds, smells, and other sensorial memories that were forgotten. And this brings new sense and new meanings to their current lives. And this movement between the past and the present might create a higher awareness of their own lives uh, and creating new insights and making them being more present in the present moment. So the past brought to the present can make the present being really, really more rich and appreciated for elderly people. That's why we should promote that. However, reminiscence can also be negative and associated to depression. When we have these elderly who are in a situation of despair. Those elderly who look back and they don't feel that life was worth living, they can start in a process of rumination when they do reminiscence. These kind of thoughts that why I did that, why I didn't do this, what bad decisions I made in my life. And this indeed can make elderly become even more depressed. So, uh, reminiscence can be a tool to overcome depression, but for specific people, sometimes it can trigger negative emotions, and we should be attentive to that. And we should be attentive to that exactly because, as I told you earlier, depression in Macau is a serious problem. Studies made in Macau are finding that the rate of depression in Macau is really high. And I believe that more studies doing nowadays could find that maybe this is even getting worse. In 2012, Zhang and collaborators, this author, made a very interesting study, a qualitative study, trying to identify what are the factors associated to depression among Macau Chinese elderly people. And these authors came up with this scheme summarizing everything. I would like you to pay to highlight the importance of this paper because in the exam this will be the question that I will make. I will ask you to think about this scheme and about this paper, and to reflect about this. So please study this paper because this is one of the essays that I will ask you to write in your exam. And basically, in this scheme, you have a very good summary on how depression appears among elderly in Macau. And these are related with the three main aspects: the lives they have lived, the present living conditions and social support, and the physical limitations and complaints. Well, as we told, when they look back to their past, to the lives they have lived, elderly people, mostly those who have trauma related to war and revolution, those who look back and they think that they had a bad marriage, or being fatherless, or had a hard job without a good reward, these are experiences from the past that might be related with depression. Then there are some present living conditions and social support that are also related to depression. And among those, living alone or being widowed are indeed very important and are here at the middle. Besides that, we have the third aspect: physical limitations and complaints. And this study showed that to have limited mobility, to depend on others, to have chronic pain, to not sleep properly, are aspects that in elderly are related with depression. But these three aspects, the lives they have, the present living conditions, and the physical limitations, are also important because they are associated with negative thinking. And the authors identifying four main negative thoughts on depressed elderly in Macau: helplessness, sadness, hopelessness, and feeling useless. This tendency for a negative thinking is what makes the main difference. So, uh, this brings really important inputs for the intervention that we psychologists can have in order to promote or to happiness and to overcome depression among elderly, more than what the past experience they have, more than the present living conditions, more than the physical limitations, the way elderly think about it, the thoughts that they create are those who are related to depression. And in a recent study in 2017, master dissertation in our university found that even when the present living conditions are satisfied, even when they feel that they have relatives, that they have good living conditions in the present, if the negative thinking is there, elderly might continue to feel depression. So, this aspect of the negative thinking is really important for us to take into consideration when working with elderly in Macau. And now, again, I would like you to think about that. When looking to this scheme, one aspect that appears is the importance of the relationships. And indeed, Martin Feldman clarifies clear and shows with this graphic how to be keep in contact with the family, to keep in contact with friends and neighbors are the most important aspects for socialization in elderly. And they keep continue saying that they do this even in late ages after 70 after 80 years old. As you can see, these aspects, family and friends, continues to be even really important. Besides that, to attend church, temple, or to do other religious activities continue to be very important for elderly. So it's always important for us to promote these experiences to them. Another important aspect that I would like you to pay attention is the death of a spouse or becoming widow. When we talk in about early adulthood, we said that intimacy, versus isolation is the main challenge or crisis that young adults will have to find someone to share their lives. And when we find that, we live most of our lives with someone, with a partner that we chose to be with us. So, as you can imagine, when we reach elderly and when we lose the person we love, that is really, really challenge. And in the book of Feldman, I found a very interesting scheme describing the three stages or phases people goes through when they are in the process of becoming widow. From a stage of preparation, in which people needs to learn different behaviors and to develop skills to deal with the loss of someone, there is a phase two of grief and mourning. And of course, this is related with, this involves shock, intense pain, grief work, and reality testing. To look to every place of, to every corner of my house and to see that the person that used to be there is not there. To see the clothes of that person there. To see that now I'm having my breakfast alone. This reality testing to face a new life without this person is really hard and really challenge for elderly. Only after that there is the acceptance of loss and elderly are ready to rebuild, and this is called the phase 3 or adaptation. So we need time to face this new reality and to learn how to rebuild ourselves, to see other ways of using our resources, to find new roles, to find new groups, and to create a new identity for ourselves. Um, this is one aspect in which we psychologists can really help elderly, is when they have to deal with the death of a spouse, and that's why I would like you to pay attention to this. Another aspect that I reported already about the developmental tasks is sexuality. You know that I'm always reinforcing the importance that sexuality has in the life of human beings, and that importance is continuing to exist even in late adulthood. Studies are showing that even after the 80s and 90s, many elderly people continues to be sexually active. Of course, that depends on their physical and mental health, but most of all, it depends on the previous regular sexual activity. What I already told you, this is a question of use it or lose it. When you have a regular sexual activity during your adulthood, you continue to have it most probably during late adulthood, and this is related to happiness and well being. Um, as it's written there, a survey found that a significant percentage of men and women after 70 they report that they masturbated. So as you can see, the impulse, the need for sexuality is still there. And when elderly people feel that they are sexually active, their well-being and quality of life will be much increased. And really, really interesting and showing how this can be important is this fact that I found also in this book is the perception of attractiveness in our partner. The studies are showing that elderly, even though they are aging, when they look to their partners, to their wives, or to their husbands, they look at them and they look at them and they perceive their partners more attractive than when they were in middle adulthood. That means that elderly, they are more willing to accept the changes of their partners and to feel attractive for them. And this is a very important indicator that we are changing with our partner and we accept and we still feel attracted and willing for sexuality. Finally, and because everything finishes with death, um, I would like just to report one important challenge with which sometimes we psychologists might have to deal. That is when uh, people can predict their death. There are situations in which people already know, or because they have, for instance, a cancer and they know that they have a specific period of life ahead of them. Uh, when this death is predictable, this is really hard for people to learn how to deal with that. And as we can see in this picture, there are five main stages: a stage of denial or shock, then a stage of anger, um, then bargaining, then depression, and only after that, acceptance of the situation. And we, psychologists or counselors, should be willing to accompany the person in all this process, in all these stages, in order they can reach acceptance and they can be prepared to be to feel serenity until the moment that their life will finish and the death will come. Indeed, I know that for Chinese and for many of you, to talk about death is not a very interesting thing. But indeed, it's important for us to think about death as part of life, and to accept it is a way of living a better life. And with this, I finish the contents of this program, and I hope to see you next week for the presentation of the different students about the elderly that you will have to introduce us. See you next week, my dear students.